Welcome to Coffee Break with Rachel V. Hill, presented by Superbook Sports. Taking a daily look at the biggest stories in Denver sports and interacting live with you, the Coffee Break fam. So sit back, relax, grab a cup of joe, and enjoy your coffee break. Here's your host, Rachel V. Hill.
I'm not Rachel V. Hill. Will Peterson, Andrew Mason joining you on this Thursday morning. Rachel down in Mexico for a bachelorette party. I don't know if she shared that or not, but I just did. So now everyone knows. She's been posting on her socials all about Cancun.
Yeah.
So it's not a big secret. It's not a big secret. I wish I was in Cancun. Instead, Mase and I are back here in Denver getting ready for Broncos and Vikings. Mase, how was Buffalo, man? We don't have to harp on it much, but just what a crazy freaking game.
It was, and you kind of look back on it, and there were, how many moments in that game did you think that it was lost for the Broncos to get it back? I mean, several, right down to obviously the 12 men on the field. But even if you kind of look at the game flow, I was saying this yesterday. If it had gone to overtime, if somehow, there was a scenario where the PAT snap had not been bobbled by Riley Dixon, and when Buffalo drove down to score, it was 22-22. And that would have led to the Broncos probably being more conservative in terms of how they attacked that game-ending drive with a tie rather than being behind. If it's 22-22 and it goes to overtime, I'm not sure I like the Broncos' chances because their defense was getting diced up pretty decently once PJ Locke went down in the second quarter. They were shutting the Bills out before then. So you kind of can go back and they did figure out a way to win, but at the same time, they really had to thread that needle well to pull that one off, right? So that may not work in other games going forward. Yeah,
there was definitely kind of the before PJ and the after PJ phase of that game. DeLorean Turner-Yell, nice guy, but I'm not so sure he's cut for this league for super long. At least they'll get Kareem Jackson back because I think we all, and we'll get to injuries in a moment, but I think we'd all rather have PJ over Kareem at this point because PJ's been so good. But I think we'd all certainly rather have Kareem over Turner-Yell.
Well, there's a level at which you can say next man up, as they say in the NFL, the old cliche. But eventually you run out of next men who can do the job. And you kind of go through the Broncos safety core. By the time you turn to Turner-Yell, it means you've gotten there because Kareem Jackson, PJ Locke, and don't forget Caden Stearns getting injured back in week 1 were all unavailable. That sort of chain reaction, except involving Justin Simmons, PJ Locke, and Caden Stearns, was how you had Delaren Turner-Yell in the lineup for most of the week 2 game against Washington and all of the week 3 and 4 games against Miami and Chicago. And when you look back on the arc of the Broncos season, when did the defense look at its worst? It was those moments when Turner-Yell was out there, right? I mean, Miami game, most of the Chicago game, and even most of the Washington game when he was in there. You don't want to put it on one player, but I think you could even see it on Monday night, Will. When Turner-Yell went out there, Buffalo started to put more stress on the safety position. They had that in their game plan, in their scouting, that if something happened injury-wise at safety, that was an area they were going to attack, and they did.
Well, the Broncos escaped with the 24-22 win. All right, so let's talk about it. They stay the night Monday night. They have plane troubles on Tuesday, and then Sean Payton gives the Broncos Wednesday off, Mase. James Marilat and I discussed this on Denver Sports Tonight last night on 104.3 The Fan. How do you feel about altering the schedule, giving them a Wednesday off when they still have a Sunday game? I mean, for reference, Sean Payton and Russell Wilson normally talk on Wednesdays. I was joking on DST last night, like, hey, I'd love to play you the audio, but they just didn't go to work today. To be clear, I do not have a big problem with it. They've won 3 in a row. They had a long time in Buffalo. They had the Tuesday plane troubles. But I have to say there is a little element of change in the routine here, Mase. And all of a sudden you're playing Sunday and your first day back at it is Thursday. I want your thoughts on sort of just taking a day off in the middle of the season.
Well, if you've got a full 7 days, a typical week, or obviously 8 days of Monday Night Football, or 6 days as it is playing on Monday night and then the following Sunday. If you do that, there has to be a day off somewhere in there. It is mandated by the league, right? Now, what teams normally do after Monday Night Football, they fly back overnight, and then it's just the typical Tuesday day off, right? Well, because they delayed their flight to get everyone a good night of sleep and then came back on Tuesday, that meant they could not use that as their mandated day off during the week. So as a result, what happened was they treated Tuesday morning in Buffalo like a typical Monday morning after a Sunday game. They had some meetings, they watched film, broke that down, etc., and then went on their way. So it was a function of, they decided that staying on a relatively normal sleep schedule rather than having, a red-eye flight back to Denver, they decided that was better than having a more normal week, which would have meant probably not doing a padded practice or full tilt practice on Wednesday, maybe a walkthrough type. That's what teams usually do. But they just decided that was the better protocol. So we'll see how it works. I have no problem with it, and I think trying some new things is healthy. But we'll see if this trial results in an error or helps result in another Bronco win.
So just to be clear, by making them go to a couple meetings and getting on a plane on Tuesday, that counted as a work day.
Yes.
So they legally, or, I don't know if legally is too strong a word, but per the CBA, they had to give them a day off. And obviously you weren't going to get Thursday or Friday off. So that's how it became Wednesday. Am I understanding you correctly?
You are. The only time the only type of week where you do not get a day off during it is if you're turning around and playing on Thursday. But then it's, you have some meetings on Friday and then you're off Saturday, Sunday, sometimes the Monday beyond that, depending on how teams choose to attack that for the mini bye. So that's just, it's all in the CBA that they have to mandate it. Now, it's interesting on the off days, they don't have to be on a specific day. Remember Vic Fangio, I think his first year with the Broncos, I believe did the Monday player day off, if I'm not mistaken, which is actually what a lot of teams used to do many decades ago. Players didn't like that. Everyone has kind of gotten in the routine of the Tuesday day off.
Yeah. Yeah, I would think, because if you get the Monday day off, then, man, it's a grind to get to your next game. It's just practice after practice after practice. At least midweek, there's a little more of a break. And I think you can make a case. I told James this last night too. And to be clear, James was with us as well, that it's not the biggest deal in the world. But if those dudes just sat on their couch for 12 hours yesterday, I got no problem with it. Those guys were in Buffalo for a long time. If they needed a 12-hour, binge watch Netflix, play video games, do whatever type day, I think a lazy day for them after a long trip to Buffalo, a hard-fought win, is probably a good thing. And then really got to get at it these next few days, because Sunday night against the Vikings is going to be here before you know it.
Yeah, and I think there's something to the physical and mental recovery as well. I'll say this. I mean, I may have mentioned earlier, we'll see kind of how it works out on Sunday. I'm not sure they're going to win or lose this game based on the choice they made. But if they find that everybody is better rested when they come back for today and tomorrow, then you probably got the result that you wanted out of this, rather than having that Monday night game and everyone trying to fiddle with their sleep schedule to get back. I would even argue, just in general, a few hours fewer spent practicing and in meetings and a few hours more invested in sleep is probably a better way of going about this than just going pedal to the metal. And I'd say that for players and coaches. I think coaches probably work past the point of good health mentally and physically. I mean, shoot, how many times, I'm sure you've noticed, how refreshed are you after a nap or a good night's sleep? And they say if you lose an hour of sleep every day for a week, the effect is like having had 2 alcoholic beverages, right? So get all the sleep you can, I say.
Yeah, no, sleep is hypercritical. I've learned that lesson over the years. All right, mates, let's move on to our next topic, which is playoffs.
Playoffs.
Playoffs. Jim, was that Jim Mora? I have that name right?
Yeah, Jim Mora back in 2001 when he was coaching the Colts. And
playoffs.
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 I just hope we win another game.
Yeah.
Jinx.
Good memories there. An all-time soundbite in the NFL. But let's talk about playoffs and where the Broncos fit in a crowded AFC. You want the good news or the bad news first? You a glass half full guy or a glass half empty guy?
It depends on my mood. There have been times in my life I'm a glass shattered on the floor guy, actually. Give me the glass half full. I'm feeling good today.
The glass half full, Mace. The Broncos are just one game out of the 7th and final playoff spot. They are 4-5. The Houston Texans are 5-4. The glass half empty. They're still 14th in the AFC. There's a lot of teams between them and the Texans. We talk about this in baseball a lot. You know, when the Rockies were relevant, we could say, oh, well, they're only 4 games out of the wild card, but they have 6 teams to jump. Well, the Broncos have more than 6 teams to jump. They have 7. I'll just run through it real quick. The Texans are 5-4. Bengals are 5-4. Colts, Bills, and Raiders all 5-5. Chargers 4-5. Jets 4-5. Broncos 4-5. What is your perspective on all of this in terms of, is it too early to start scoreboard watching? Is it too early to start rooting for certain matchups, particularly like tonight you have Ravens-Bengals on Thursday Night Football? Should Broncos fans have a rooting interest in that? How do you view looking at the playoff standings in mid-November?
Well, it's probably too early, although tonight's game is an interesting study because if the Ravens win, then that gets them to 8-3. One thing that does help the Broncos is if it's fine for the teams at the top to basically run away and hide and get wins at the expense of those teams that are in that muddled middle, right? So, look, like the Broncos, they're not catching Kansas City, right? Kansas City is 7-2. The Broncos are 4-5. So, if Baltimore, Kansas City, Jacksonville, Miami keep winning, that's probably for the best. You're thinking wild card anyway. Where you want those losses to come are by teams in the middle. So you want, I think if you had to root for a result, you would want to root for Baltimore to beat Cincinnati tonight.
I agree.
And then other sets of results going forward, you love it if any of those teams in the middle lose to NFC teams, for example, because they're not going to come into play when it comes to tiebreakers and whatnot. So, yeah, it's probably very aspirational at this point, but maybe it's not too early to start rooting for specific results here coming up this weekend.
All right, so with that being said, the New York Times simulator took the Broncos from a 4% chance to an 11% chance to make the postseason. Does 11 feel low to you? Because it feels kind of low to me for a team that's won 3 in a row, has beaten the Chiefs and the Bills, and gets to play backup QBs the next 2 weeks. Mase, if Cleveland loses to Pittsburgh, which is very much in play because the Steelers find a way to win every game, and then comes here and lose, the Broncos can wake up 11 days from now tied with the Browns at 6-5. And right now the Browns are in the 6th seed in the AFC. So I know the New York Times is just doing simulations and computers, but I got to be honest, coming off the wins they're coming off of and getting to play backup QBs the next 2 weeks, I think 11% feels low.
Yeah, but at the same time, I think the New York Times is also considering that 3-game road swing the Broncos have in December. And 3-game road swings have kicked the butt of Broncos teams, even the ones that were really good, right? So, like, that's the thing that is staring you down is at Houston, at the Chargers, at Detroit. Houston is actually in a playoff position right now. If the postseason started today, they're the number 7 seed. And obviously, C.J. Stroud is even getting some MVP chatter, right? So there's that. The Chargers, I mean, who can figure them out except the fact that they don't have much of a defense? They're sitting there like the Broncos at 4-5. But the thing is, SoFi Stadium is a place where the Broncos have never won a game between the Rams and Chargers, they're 0-4 going to SoFi Stadium, right? And then at Detroit, Detroit right now is sitting there at 7-2, tied for the second best record in the league. And we were actually talking about this in the press box on Monday night. That's looking like a game that is going to be moved to Saturday night, because that's one of there are 5 games that can be moved from Sunday the 17th to Saturday the 16th. That looks very much like a contest that the NFL may want to spotlight, because the Broncos are at least respectable, and the Lions are becoming kind of an it team.
Yeah.
And they be at home. So I think when you talk about the 11%, statistically speaking, I can see that. And also, you're facing backup quarterbacks the next couple of weeks, but how have the Vikings looked with Josh Dobbs? They've looked pretty good. Dobbs is kind of that perfect quarterback to step in and run a pretty structured scheme like the Shanahan-McVay scheme is, right? How many quarterbacks have we seen step in and do reasonably well in that scheme? Like, for example, Nick Mullins went in San Francisco and beat the Broncos back in 2018. It wasn't a good 49er team, but Nick Mullins made a pretty credible account of himself. And what has he done since then as he's bounced around? Not much. That scheme is something that Josh Dobbs can run effectively. And, by the way, probably looking at Justin Jefferson back for the Vikings on Sunday night as well. So I think that game that I don't think we can say, they got the backup quarterback. It's a game the Broncos should win. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, are the Broncos not underdogs going into this game?
No, they're actually 2.5-point favorites. So
okay. Shows you how much I pay attention to the point spread.
I know. You're making a lot of sense, Mason. I get your point. My counterpoint would be, you got a huge break not playing Kirk Cousins and Deshaun Watson the next 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And at some point in life, you have to just seize opportunities and seize moments. And not to sound too much like Eminem, but you've already lost at home to the Raiders, the Commanders, and the Jets. You can't lose at home to Josh Dobbs and be taken seriously when you already have those 3 bad home losses on your resume. And it's the kid out of UCLA, Dorian
Thompson Robinson.
Yeah. Dorian Thompson. Like, you can't lose to these two if you want to be taken seriously as a playoff contender. And that's why last night I told James it was a must-win on Sunday, and he had first poo-pooed me, and you'll be proud of me. I got him to come around that it actually is a must-win against the Vikings.
Well, the other thing, it's a must-win also because you're sitting there on 5 losses, and how many can you really afford to absorb and still be a playoff team, right? You probably can you can handle 2 more losses here, which means, basically you've got to go 6-2. And I mentioned that 3-game road swing. I think if you come out of those 3 road games at 1-2, you've done okay, not great, but the path for the Broncos here, unless they somehow win a tiebreaker at 9-8, is going 6-2 and winning all of the home games plus that season ender in Las Vegas.
Yep.
Right. I think that's how you get from A to B, and then get one of those 3 games on the road swing. Actually, right now, I'd say the most likely one of those 3 is probably against the Chargers, who just cannot seem to get out of their own way sometimes. Right. And now that being said, if you look at the Chargers' next 3 games here, at Green Bay, Baltimore at home, at New England, I'd say that's probably 2-1, putting them at 6-6 when they play the Broncos. That might be 2 6-6 teams battling it out on December the 10th in Los Angeles for maybe not an elimination game, but a game that would put the loser in very deep trouble and probably needing to win out to have a good shot at the playoffs.
Yeah, maybe a de facto elimination game for sure.
Yeah.
A lot of good conversation about the playoffs. Enjoyed your insight on it. Let's keep it moving, though, and get to the injury report, which, of course, was an estimation yesterday. If you were with us at the top of the show, the Broncos did not practice. But 2 big names, 2 starters pop up on that injury report. Ben Powers and P.J. Locke, both estimated as DNP. Powers with a foot, Locke with an ankle. Mase, these are 2 big ones, especially – I know you pointed out they've played with the same O-line all year, and We've discussed how much better the secondary is with PJ
Mhm.
Locke. Level of concern on both of these 1 to 10.
Well, you're getting Kareem Jackson back from suspension, so at least you can have your original starting tandem at safety on Sunday. And the Broncos' defensive revival did start with Kareem Jackson and Justin Simmons together on the field. They were playing in Kansas City. They were playing most of the game together against Green Bay. So with that, you can tell PJ Locke, who had a walking boot on his foot ankle in the locker room on Monday, you can say, okay, take a week or two. Maybe with PJ, you're thinking, let's get him back, if not by the Cleveland game, by the Houston game on December the 3rd. So you can probably start there. Ben Powers, that's the bigger concern. Look, one of the reasons why the Broncos offensive line has improved this year is they've had cohesion. They've had the same starting five all season. Think of how many different offensive line combinations they had last year. I mean, it was a constant shuffle up front for the O-line. One of the reasons why the Broncos, protection-wise and run-blocking-wise, have gotten their feet under them is because they've had that stability there. You'd probably be looking at Quinn Bailey coming in for Ben Powers. Bailey, of course, he's always that extra tackle when they want to go for a jumbo package, and he announces himself as eligible, that we've seen a lot more of in the last 2 or 3 games. So you wonder how they do that. I guess Cam Fleming would be the extra tackle if they wanted to do that going forward, since he's your swing tackle anyway. But I'll say this for Ben Powers. I think he was playing through this injury on Monday night because he had more quarterback hurries allowed over the course of that one game against Buffalo than he had in the previous 7 games combined. That's data coming from Pro Football Focus. So there was a lot of frustration out there about Ben Powers' game because he had a lot of pressure coming from the interior. Ed Oliver in particular was just dominant up front, really making things miserable for both Ben Powers and Lloyd Cushenberry at center. Now we kind of know what was going on with Ben Powers, that he was clearly not at 100% physically, and that explains why that game for him looks so different than the previous several games that he had put together. It's he looks like he was trying to play through something, and after that, I think you probably tell Ben Powers, okay, if you need to rest up and make sure you're right for the stretch run here. So it's rather unfortunate the Broncos might be looking at having a different offensive line combination on Sunday, but at the same time, Ben Powers did appear to have a really rough game when it seems like he was playing injured.
So would you say that Quinn Bailey at 100% is better than Ben Powers at 70% or whatever the heck he was against the Bills?
Well, if you're talking about a foot injury, I would say it knocks you down to more than 70%. It might knock you down to 40 or 50, to 40% or 30%. I mean, everything for an offensive lineman starts with the feet, right? Yeah, if you don't have good balance, if you can't get yourself set, you're gonna, you've got some guy bull rushing into you or trying to make a stunt or rip or swim move, you're gonna be ashes, right? That's why those lower leg injuries are such a concern. When you're, for any O lineman as well, when you got that much weight being borne by the lower leg and you can't get your balance, someone like Ed Oliver, as we saw on Monday, is going to eat you up. So I'd say if, with such an injury, probably better to be cautious and try to get by with Quinn Bailey and your reserves.
While we're on injuries, Sean Payton said last week he does expect Greg Dulcich to be back this season. The tight end position has been underwhelming, to say the least. Maybe okay in the run blocking game, but in the pass blocking game has not done much of all. Adam Troutman, I think, had 1 catch. Chris Manhertz, I think, had 1 catch. That was it. The Bills. Is Dulcich like I don't want to get my hopes up about Dulcich, Mase, but I'm curious, could he be this sort of secret weapon in their hip pocket? Like, if they can finally figure the hammy thing out with him, that he could add a new layer to this offense and people could go, that's what was missing, a dynamic pass-catching tight end? Or am I just being way too optimistic at this point?
Look how frequently they were targeting him in the first half of week 1, right? I mean, he was a huge part of what they were trying to do, and that was with Jerry Jeudy injured. Now you got Jeudy back out there, Cortland Sutton out there. Having Dulcich would make the Broncos' complement of pass catchers pretty tough to contain. But again, it's having him healthy. I thought it was really interesting that they used a practice squad activation Monday night on Lucas Kroll, who had been with the Saints practice squad last year, briefly on their active roster. That he had a big season. He had an Albert O-like game in the preseason finale for New Orleans, and then they waived him, and the Broncos put him on their practice squad. And he played a substantial number of snaps, and they were doing some interesting things. There was one personnel package that they ran a few times that had Lucas Kroll, Marvin Mims Jr., and Jaleel McLaughlin out there together. I mean, that's a lot of youth out there, no doubt.
Yeah.
Kroll, first year, Kroll, a second-year player who really didn't play much last year, if at all. Mims, obviously rookie. McLaughlin, obviously rookie. But all of them are dynamic. I wonder if we won't see them try Kroll more often in that type of role on Sunday and maybe get him the ball. I really wanted to see them get Kroll involved. And when I asked Sean Payton about Kroll on Tuesday, he basically said, look, that they wanted the element that he brings, which is to say they needed somebody who can catch the ball and potentially make a play, right? There was that one play to Adam Troutman in the right flat on Monday night, and DeMar Hamlin hits him. Troutman's got a good 45 pounds on DeMar Hamlin?
Sure.
And Hamlin just gets him down like that, right? I mean, bless Adam Troutman, but he cannot seem to make that first guy miss. He can't seem to break tackles for whatever reason, and that limits the kind of dynamic threat that he can be. So, yeah, it's Dulcich could be that secret weapon, but you don't want to get him out there until the hamstring is right. I'll say this. In the period of practice open to media, we usually see injured players working out on the side field while that's going on. Like, for example, we saw PJ Locke when he was working his way back. We saw Baron Browning on the pup. Since he went on injured reserve, we haven't seen Greg Dulcich over there yet, which tells you that they're going to take their time with him. Actually, let's see, Green Bay, Kansas City, Buffalo, Minnesota. He's eligible to come back potentially for the Cleveland game. But the fact that we have yet to see Greg Dulcich out there, even on the side field, tells me that they're going to play the slow game with him, and maybe his return happens sometime in December. But be interesting to see if they unleash him at some point.
Well, it's been 6 days since you guys were allowed to watch practice, so who knows?
We'll find out.
Maybe Mase will be sharing a positive Greg Dulcich update with us. One Lucas Kroll note too, and we got a couple of comments about it. I know you were at the game, so I don't know if you saw the replay, but Russ had him open down the right side for a touchdown. And it was holding was called on the play, so it would have come back anyhow. And Joe and Troy made that clear, but it was one of those, Lucas was holding his hand up like, hey, I'm open. And the Russ just never saw him. So they did have sort of a gadget kind of wheel route for Lucas Kroll that if Russ had seen him and someone hadn't held, could have been 6, could have been a big play.
It wasn't the only time he was open either. So that part does impress you that obviously they're setting things up, but he looks to be a pretty good route runner who can get some separation in the right matchup. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Even though he didn't have a reception, I still thought that there was something intriguing there. I hope the Broncos use another practice squad activation on him this Sunday, because I think there's more there than we saw.
Yeah, no, I would agree. You've got a couple more to burn on Lucas Kroll, and honestly, you're kind of burning them while you're waiting to make a decision on Greg Dulcich, because Sean Payton can say, "Hey, we expect Greg back." You don't see him on the practice field for the next 2 weeks. That may change. They may shut him down for the season. I mean, he's a good guy to activate a couple times, sort of see what he brings to the table. And then if Greg can't go, then you'll promote him to the 53.
Yeah, exactly. Now, it's also significant where Lucas Kroll came from as well. He was in New Orleans. Now, obviously, Sean Payton had moved on from New Orleans by the time Lucas Kroll was there. But, yeah, I'm pretty sure Sean Payton.
Yeah.
He still knows a lot of people. I'm pretty sure Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis are still having conversations, right, about personnel and things like that. So, I think there was a little bit of a recommendation there.
That would make sense. That would make sense. All right. Well, it was really fun. We appreciate everyone hanging out. We appreciate Matt behind the scenes. Appreciate all your comments. I will be back tomorrow with my guy Cecil Lammy, and I hope you tune in. For Mase, I'm Will. This has been Coffee Break. Take care, everyone.